My name is Ed Vandersluis. For 40 years, I was the postmaster of Decorah, Iowa, a town where I knew every name on every mailbox by heart. 18 months after burying my wife, doctors found multiple myeloma in my bones. When I called my only son, he said 4 quiet words: "I can't be there." 2 years later, I would say them back and shatter the perfect life he built. People who haven't been to Decorah usually think Iowa is flat. It isn't. Not where I live. We're in the driftless region, a corner of the state where the glaciers forgot to come through and the limestone bluffs still rise up over the upper Iowa River, like they were waiting for someone to notice them. There are bald eagles in the trees along Trout Run Creek. There's a Norwegian-American museum on Water Street. There's a college built into the hillside. And there's a small white house on Phelps Street that I have lived in for 40 years. I bought that house in 1986 with my wife, Ruth. We'd been married just under a year. She was 26 and I was 27, and we had no business buying a house with a leaking porch roof and a furnace from the Eisenhower administration. But Ruth had a way of looking at things and seeing what they could become rather than what they were. She did that with the house. She did that with me, mostly. It had been 18 months since Ruth died. Multiple sclerosis took her in pieces, the way some illnesses do, slowly and then all at once. She kept the wedding ring on until the day she couldn't lift her hand to ask me to take it off. I keep it now in the wooden recipe box on the kitchen counter, the one her grandmother brought over from Son in 1904, packed with cards in 3 generations of women's handwriting. Crumb cake, lefse, the wrong way to make lutefisk, and the right way to forgive someone for trying. I open that box most mornings. I tell people it's for the coffee cake recipe. It isn't. The morning everything changed, I was 67 years old. It was a Wednesday in April. There was light rain on the tulip beds Ruth had planted in 2011, the last year she could still kneel in dirt. I noticed 2 things over breakfast. The first was blood in the toilet, which I'd been pretending wasn't there for about 10 days. The second was that the dull ache in my lower back, the one I'd been calling arthritis since Christmas, had stopped being dull. It felt like something was pressing outward from inside the bone. I called Dr. Jensen at the Winneshiek Medical Center clinic. I've been seeing Larry Jensen for 31 years. He delivered my son. He held Ruth's hand in the room where we got her diagnosis. He is a quiet man with very steady eyes, and when I told him about the blood and the back, he was quiet a little longer than usual on the line. "Come in this afternoon, Ed," he said. "Bring something to read. We're going to do a few things." A few things turned out to be blood work, a urine sample, a bone scan, and a serum protein test I'd never heard of. 3 days later, he called me at home. Not the nurse. Larry himself. "I'd like you to see somebody at Mayo," he said. "I've already made the call. They can see you Tuesday." "Tuesday this week?" "Yes." I was quiet then. I knew what it meant, the way men of a certain age know things. Mayo Clinic is 73 miles north on Highway 52. People in this part of Iowa don't drive to Mayo on 3 days' notice for ordinary news. Tuesday came clear and cold. I drove myself. Pete Mickelson, who'd been my supervisor at the post office, offered to ride along, and I told him no. I wanted the truck cab to myself. I wanted the long stretch of Highway 52 between Kalmar and Harmony to be quiet. I wanted, I think, to feel exactly as alone as I was about to be told I was. The Gonda building at Mayo is 20 floors of glass and limestone, and inside it feels less like a hospital than an airport for the sick. I rode an elevator to floor 10, and was met by a woman with a clipboard who walked me to a small office with a west-facing window. The doctor's name was Anjali Patel. She had warm eyes and the careful posture of someone who had delivered hard news enough times to have a method. She did not make me wait. She told me what they had found. Multiple myeloma. Stage 2. The plasma cells in my bone marrow had begun making a protein my body did not need, and that protein was eating my bones from the inside out. The pain in my lower back was a lytic lesion in my L4 vertebra. The blood in my urine was my kidneys protesting. There was treatment, she said. There were several lines of treatment. There was time. I asked her the question I had brought with me from Decorah, the one Ruth would have asked. Dr. Patel, I said, is this the kind of cancer you beat? She didn't look away. I appreciated that. Mr. Vandersluis, she said, this is the kind of cancer you live with, not the kind you beat. We manage it. We buy you time. Some patients get a great deal of time. But I am not going to tell you that you are going to be cured. That isn't what this disease is. I nodded. I thanked her. I took the folder she handed me, full of pamphlets and appointment cards and the names of people who would now know me by my disease. I made it back to the parking garage before I sat down on the concrete curb beside my truck and put my head in my hands. The rain had started again. I could hear it on the metal pipes overhead. I sat there a long time. Then I stood up, got into the cab, and took my phone out of my coat pocket. There was only one number I knew I had to call. For the first time in 39 years of marriage, and the 18 months since, I needed to make a call I couldn't address by hand. The line clicked twice before he picked up. I remember every word of what came next, because some conversations you don't forget. You file them. Hey, Dad. Christopher's voice came through with an echo behind it, the kind you hear when someone is in a hallway with high ceilings. I could hear footsteps, the distant ring of an elevator. He was at work. Caldwell and Reeves Government Affairs, K Street, Washington, District of Columbia. My son the lobbyist. My son the man who helped energy companies talk to senators. My son who married one senator's daughter and called it love. Christopher, I said. My voice did something I wasn't expecting. It held. Barely. But it held. I need to tell you something. I just left Mayo Clinic. Mayo? What were you doing at Mayo? They found something. Multiple myeloma. It's a blood cancer. It's in my bones. Silence. 3 seconds. Maybe 4. I counted them the way I used to count seconds between lightning and thunder when Christopher was small and scared of storms. Cancer, he said. Okay. Okay. That's wow. That's a lot. It is, I said. Is it, what stage? What are they saying? Stage 2. There's treatment. Chemotherapy, possibly a stem cell transplant later. It's the kind of cancer you manage, not the kind you cure. Dr. Patel was straightforward about it. Okay. He said it the way people say okay when they are already constructing the next sentence in their head, and the okay is just a placeholder. Okay, Dad, listen. I hear you. I do. And I'm sorry. That's serious. I waited. There's a thing that happens in a conversation when someone is about to say but. You can feel it the way you feel. A change in air pressure before a storm. The sentence leans forward. The tone shifts from concern to logistics. But the timing on this is really, really bad. There it was. Whitney's father has the energy bill on the Senate floor next month. This is the bill, Dad. The one we've been working toward for 2 years. Caldwell and Reeves is going to be named on the lobbying disclosure. And Senator Caldwell has basically told me that if I deliver on this, I'm a partner. Full equity. My name on the door. I've been working 70-hour weeks since January, and Whitney's been handling everything at home, and she's already, we're barely keeping it together as it is. I looked out through the rain-streaked windshield of my truck. A woman in a blue raincoat was helping an elderly man into a wheelchair near the entrance to the Gonda building. She was holding an umbrella over his head instead of her own. Dad, I can't be there. Not right now. The timing is I literally cannot pivot. 4 words. I can't be there. Said the way someone declines a dinner invitation. Said with the same casual architecture as I can't make brunch. As though what I had just told him was an inconvenience with a flexible deadline. What about Cousin Marjorie? He said. She's retired, right? She's only in Cedar Falls. And that Halverson lady you talk about, the one with the bakery. You've got people there, Dad. You've always been good at that, the community thing. You'll put together a team. You always do. The community thing. 39 years of marriage. 40 years of delivering mail in snow that would bury a sedan. 18 months of sitting in a house that still smelled like Ruth's hand lotion. And my son, from a leather chair on K Street, was calling it the community thing. Okay, I said. Okay? Okay, Christopher. I hear you. Dad, I love you. I do. And when this bill clears and things calm down, I'm going to come out there and we'll sit down and talk about everything. I promise. Just give me 6 months. 6 months. He said it like it was a small number. Like time was something a man with cancer in his bones had plenty of to spare. Sure, I said. 6 months. I'll call you this weekend. We'll talk more. He didn't call that weekend. He didn't call the weekend after that either. I drove home on Highway 52 with the radio off. The fields between Harmony and Kalmar were just starting to green, that early April color that looks more like hope than like a season. I didn't see any of it. I drove 73 miles with my hands at 10 and 2, and my eyes on the center line and my mind somewhere I couldn't name. I pulled into the driveway on Phelps Street at 6:14 in the evening. The tulip beds were dark with rain. The porch light was on because I'd set it on a timer after Ruth died. She would have done that for me. I did it for myself. I walked inside. I hung my coat on the hook by the door. I went to the kitchen and stood in front of the recipe box on the counter. Ruth's handwriting on the cards inside. Her grandmother's lutefisk recipe. The ring I'd put in there the week after the funeral because I couldn't look at it on the nightstand anymore, but I couldn't put it in a drawer either. I stood there for a long time. Maybe 2 hours. Maybe more. I didn't cry. I want to be clear about that. Not because crying would have been weak. Ruth cried whenever she needed to, and she was the strongest person I've ever known. I didn't cry because what I felt wasn't grief. It was something quieter. A recalibration. A man standing in his kitchen, realizing that the person he thought would always show up had just told him, clearly and without cruelty, that he wouldn't. I made a different kind of decision that night. Not a hostile one. Not a plan for revenge or a vow of silence. Just a quiet shift, the kind that happens when the ground under you settles into a new shape and you decide to stand where you are instead of chasing the ground that moved. I would get my treatment. I would show up to every appointment. I would figure out who was willing to stand beside me, and I would let them. And the people who weren't, I would let them be who they were. I didn't know it yet, but those 4 words had a postmark on them. And someday, 2 years from then, I'd return them to sender. Decorah, Iowa, has a population of just under 8,000 people. I had delivered mail to every single house on Route 12 for 40 years. Turns out, people remember that. Treatment started the 2nd week of May. Dr. Patel put me on a regimen she explained carefully, and I understood partially. Chemotherapy drugs in a combination that sounded like a license plate. Every other Tuesday, I would drive to Rochester, sit in a reclining chair with an IV line in my arm for 3 hours, and then drive home. The other days, I took pills, some for the cancer, some for the side effects of the pills for the cancer, some for the side effects of those. The first cycle hit me like a door I didn't see coming. By day 4, the fatigue wasn't tiredness. It was weight. Like someone had filled my coat pockets with wet sand and asked me to walk uphill. My hands tingled. My appetite disappeared. I lost 6 pounds in 2 weeks because eating felt like a chore someone had assigned me and forgotten to explain why. I hadn't told anyone in Decorah. Pride, maybe. Privacy, more likely. But small towns have a way of knowing things before you say them. Someone at the pharmacy noticed the prescriptions. Or someone at the Lutheran church noticed I'd missed 3 Sundays. Or someone just looked at me and saw what cancer looks like when it's settling in. Lena Halverson showed up on my porch on a Saturday morning in late May, carrying a warm box of Kringle and a Fayey, made it clear she was not there to ask permission. Lena runs the bakery on Water Street. Her great-grandmother opened it in 1912. It has survived 2 floods, a fire, and the town's unanimous rejection of her espresso experiment in 2008. She is 62. 5'3", and has the disposition of a woman who has been getting up at 4 in the morning to bake for decades and does not have time for nonsense. Ed Vandersluis, she said, standing on my porch with flour still on her left sleeve. I have been putting Kringle in your mailbox at the post office every Christmas for 38 years, and you have never once complained about the almond filling. So I know you like it. I'm going to leave this here. Tuesday mornings, I'll bring soup. Fridays, I'll bring a hot dish. You don't have to thank me. You don't have to call. You just have to eat it. I opened my mouth. Don't make a fuss, she said, and left. That was the beginning. Pete Mickelson came next. Pete had been my supervisor at the Decorah post office for the last 12 years of his career before he retired. He is 66, built like a mailbox himself, and has the peculiar gift of being able to talk for an hour and a half without ever saying anything that requires a response. He called me on a Tuesday evening and said, "Ed, I'm driving you to Mayo. Don't argue. I've already cleared my Tuesdays." I argued. He didn't listen. The first drive up Highway 52, Pete told me about the time in 1994 when he accidentally delivered an entire bag of mail to the wrong route and didn't realize it for 3 days. He told the same story, the second drive, and the third, and the fourth. Pete had exactly 2 stories from 40 years of carrying mail. He had told them both 400 times. They were better every time. I didn't know it then, but those drives saved something in me. Not my body. Dr. Patel and the chemicals were handling that. But something else, something that had been going quiet since the parking garage. Pete's voice filling the truck cab on Highway 52, telling me for the 11th time about the misdirected mailbag, was the sound of someone choosing to be present. No agenda. No deadline. Just a man with a bad story and a full tank of gas and nowhere else he'd rather be on a Tuesday morning. Pastor Carl Thorson, from Decorah Lutheran, was the third. Carl is the kind of pastor who wears jeans under his vestments and has a handshake that could reorganize your vertebrae. He called me one Wednesday and said the men's prayer group wanted to add me to their weekly circle. I didn't ask to be added, I said. Nobody asks, Ed. That's the point. The group met Wednesday evenings in the church basement. 6 men, all over 60, all with various things they were carrying. One of them was Henrik Larsson, 70 years old, president of the local Sons of Norway Lodge, and the owner of a laugh that could be heard through a closed door. Henrik brought a bottle of Norwegian aquavit to the first meeting I attended, and poured a small glass for everyone. To Ed, he said, lifting his glass, "Who put mail in my box every morning for 40 years and never once lost a package?" Skål. I wanted to say something. I couldn't. I just held the glass and nodded and drank something that tasted like caraway and fire and something I hadn't felt in a long time. There was a moment, maybe 2 months in, when I was sitting on the front porch after one of Lena's Friday hot dishes, the one with the tater tot casserole that Ruth used to say was proof God loved the Midwest specifically, and I realized something that stopped me mid-bite. I had spent 40 years putting things in other people's mailboxes. Letters, packages, bills, birthday cards, condolence notes. 40 years of carrying what mattered to other people and placing it where they could find it. I had never once imagined what it would feel like to be the address on the envelope, to be the one someone was delivering to. Not because they had to, because they chose to. Lena's Kringle, Pete's terrible stories, Henrik's aquavit, Pastor Thorson's jeans and handshake. A town that already knew my name long before I got sick, showing up now not out of obligation but out of something simpler and older than that. I was being delivered to, and I didn't know it yet, but I was being adopted by a town that had known my name for 4 decades. I just hadn't realized I was the one who needed delivering. The wedding invitation arrived on a Thursday in September. Cream-colored envelope, gold foil monogram, calligraphy I knew Whitney's mother had paid for. I held it in my hands for 30 seconds. Then I set it on the kitchen counter next to Ruth's recipe box, unopened. It sat there for 2 weeks. I walked past it every morning on the way to the coffee pot. I never opened it. I knew what was inside. My son was getting married at the Caldwell family ranch in the Texas Hill Country, and the invitation had been addressed to Mr. Edward Vandersloos in a hand that was not my son's. I wrote a note on a piece of post office stationery I still kept in the desk drawer. 3 words and a signature. Cannot attend. Health reasons. I signed it Edward. Not Dad. Not Love. Dad. Just Edward. I put the note inside the unopened envelope, sealed it again, and mailed it back to the return address in Georgetown. It was the most professional piece of mail I had ever sent. It was also, I think, the saddest. Christopher did not call to ask about the health reasons. I want to be clear about that. A man tells his son he cannot attend the wedding due to health reasons 6 months after a cancer diagnosis the son already knows about, and the son does not pick up the phone. I'm not telling you this to make you angry. I'm telling you because it's what happened. My cousin Marjorie Olson, 75 years old, and Christopher's godmother, called me the week of the wedding. She had flown to Texas. 300 guests, she said. 4 state senators, a string quartet, a cake that cost more than my first car. She asked me why I wasn't there. When I told her about the myeloma, there was a silence on the line so long I thought the call had dropped. He didn't tell anyone, Ed, she whispered. Not even me. Christmas came. Whitney sent a card. It arrived in a Caldwell and Reeves Company envelope with a photo of her and Christopher in front of a gold-lit tree at what I assumed was the Georgetown apartment. Wishing you a peaceful holiday, Christopher and Whitney. Machine printed. No handwriting. No personal note. I looked at it for a while, then folded it in half and tucked it into the back of the notebook I keep in my desk, the one where I've recorded every customer on my route who passed away over 40 years. It fit right in. Another address that had gone quiet. That same night, I did something I cannot fully explain. I took a piece of paper from the kitchen drawer, wrote 4 words on it in pencil, "I can't be there," and put it in an envelope. I addressed it to myself. Edward Vandersluis, Phelps Street, Decorah, Iowa. I stamped it. I walked it down to the blue collection box on Water Street in the dark, the same box I had emptied 10,000 times over 40 years, and I mailed it. It came back 6 days later, with a postmark from the Decorah Processing Center. I put it in my desk drawer, unopened. I didn't know when I would need it. I just knew I would. Winter passed. Then, spring. The snow melted off the bluffs along the upper Iowa River, and the trout came back to the creek, and the tulips Ruth planted pushed through the dirt one more time without her. Dr. Patel told me in June that my numbers had stabilized. The M protein levels were holding. The lesion in my L4 had not progressed. She used a phrase I hadn't heard before. Smoldering stable. She said, "Welcome to the quiet club, Mr. Vandersluis. This is where we want to stay for a very long time." I went home that afternoon and opened Ruth's recipe box to put away the appointment card. When I lifted the stack of cards, I found something underneath I had never noticed. A manila envelope, old, soft at the edges. Inside were 30 handwritten pages in Ruth's careful script. It was the beginning of a book, a collection of recipes and stories from the Norwegian women of Decorah, the ones who had carried krumkake pans and lefse griddles across the Atlantic and handed them down through kitchens for 100 years. Ruth had been writing it. She had never told me. She had never finished it. I sat at the kitchen table and read all 30 pages without standing up. Then, I called Lena Halverson and asked if she would help me finish it. "Ed Vandersluis," Lena said. "I have been waiting for someone to write that book my entire life." Over the next year, I visited 11 women in Winneshiek County. I sat in their kitchens. I wrote down their recipes and their stories. The book grew from 30 pages to 140. Lena contributed 7 recipes and 1 essay about her great-grandmother that made me cry at the bakery counter. Pete drove me to 3 of the interviews and talked through all of them. The Decorah newspapers ran a story about the project. Ruth's name was in the headline. I cut it out and put it in the recipe box where her manuscript had been, 2 years after diagnosis. Pete and I fished Trout Run Creek on Sunday afternoons. Lena's Tuesday soup and Friday hot dish had become as reliable as mail delivery. Henrik opened a second bottle of aquavit at the prayer group, and we toasted without needing to say what we were toasting. My weight was back. My hands had stopped tingling. I was not cured. I would never be cured. But I was whole in a way I had not expected and had certainly not planned. I had built something. Not loud. Not impressive. But mine. And it had cost me every quiet evening and every hard morning and every Tuesday drive to Rochester to build it. No one was going to take it away. It was a Tuesday morning in October, 2 years almost to the week since the parking garage at Mayo. I was making oatmeal. Steam rose slow from the pot. The phone buzzed once on the counter. I looked down. One word on the screen. Christopher. And just for a moment, just one ringing moment, I thought I'd been wrong about how long peace could last. I let it ring 3 times. The oatmeal kept simmering. 23 months since I had last seen that name on my screen, and I remember thinking that the phone looked different with his name on it, like an envelope you weren't expecting from an address you'd stopped checking. I picked up. Dad. His voice was wrong. Not the polished conference call Christopher I'd heard in that parking garage 2 years ago. This voice had edges missing. This voice had been awake too long. Christopher. Dad, I need to talk to you. Okay, I'm in trouble. I turned the burner down on the oatmeal. I didn't sit. I stood by the stove with one hand on the counter the way you do when you're bracing for something without wanting to admit you're bracing. The firm is under investigation, he said. FBI. They've been looking at Caldwell and Reeves for 8 months. There are emails, Dad. Emails about payments to a congressional aide tied to the energy bill. My name is on some of them. I knew things were aggressive, but I didn't think he stopped. Started again. Senator Caldwell went on cable news last Tuesday and said he had no relationship with the firm and never authorized any of its lobbying activities. He said that on national television, Dad. The man whose daughter I married. The man who toasted me at his ranch in front of 300 people. I said nothing. There was more coming. I could hear it the way you hear the second half of a storm. Whitney filed for divorce 4 days ago. She sent me a text. A text, Dad. 18 months of marriage. And she sent me a text message saying her attorney would be in touch about the apartment. Her family changed the locks on the Georgetown place while I was at a meeting with my lawyer. I came back, and my key didn't work. I'm at a Hampton Inn in Reston, Virginia, paying with the only credit card that still has my name on it. I don't. His voice broke. Actually broke. The sound of something structural giving way. Dad, I have nowhere to go. I literally can't pivot. There is nowhere to pivot to. I heard those words, and I heard the other ones underneath them. The ones from 2 Octobers ago. The same word. Pivot. Said then like a power move. Said now like a white flag. Can I come home? He said. Just for a few weeks. Just until I figure out what's next. You've got the room. You've got the time. I really need someone right now, Dad. I have nobody. The kitchen was very quiet. The oatmeal had stopped simmering. Outside, I could hear a cardinal in the elm tree by the driveway, the one Ruth used to watch from the window over the sink. I looked around the room. Ruth's recipe box on the counter. Lena's hand-drawn calendar on the refrigerator with my chemo maintenance appointments circled in red. The stack of printed pages on the kitchen table, the finished manuscript, Ruth's book, 140 pages of Norwegian women and their kitchens, ready for the local printer. My medication bottles lined up on the windowsill. Pete's phone number pinned to the corkboard by the door. Everything I had built in 2 years of showing up for myself when no one else would. I walked to the desk by the phone. I opened the top drawer. Inside, underneath a box of stamps and a roll of return address labels, was a sealed envelope. My handwriting on the front. My address. A postmark from the Decorah Processing Center dated December of the year my son got married, and didn't ask why his father wasn't there. I picked it up. I turned it over in my hands. Then I opened it for the first time. The pencil was faded but legible. 4 words on a single piece of paper. I can't be there. Christopher, I said. My voice was even, not cold, not cruel, just even. The way a man's voice gets when he has rehearsed something without knowing he was rehearsing it. I can't be there. Silence. What? You said those words to me, son. October. 2 years ago. I was sitting in a parking garage at Mayo Clinic with a cancer diagnosis and shaking hands, and you told me you couldn't be there. You said the timing was bad. You said you literally could not pivot. Dad. I wrote them down that Christmas. The 4 words. I put them in an envelope, and I addressed it to myself, and I mailed it from the blue box on Water Street, the same box I emptied every morning for 40 years. It came back with a postmark. I kept it in this drawer for 2 years. I didn't know what it was for. I think I do now. I could hear him breathing. Quick, unsteady. I'm returning them to sender, Christopher. Those 4 words. They're yours. I kept them safe. And now I'm giving them back. The silence that followed was not the silence of anger. It was not denial. It was not the calculating quiet of a man building his next argument. It was the sound of someone hearing, for the first time, what their own words sounded like when they landed on someone else. There was a noise on the line I hadn't heard from my son since he was 12 years old, and we had to put down his hamster, and he sat on the back steps and wept into his jacket sleeve. It wasn't loud. It was barely a sound at all. Just the particular frequency of a grown man realizing he was smaller than he had told himself he was. I stood in the kitchen with the open envelope in one hand, and the phone in the other, and the oatmeal cold on the stove, and I felt nothing like victory. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't justice. It was just a delivery. The last one I would ever need to make. There is a postal procedure for mail that can't be delivered to its intended address. We call it forwarding. You don't return the letter. You don't throw it away. You redirect it to where the person actually is. That morning, standing in my kitchen with a cold pot of oatmeal and my son crying on the other end of the line, I learned the same thing applied to love. Neither of us spoke for a while. I could hear him breathing, the kind of breathing that happens when someone is trying to pull themselves back together and their body isn't cooperating. I waited. I have spent 40 years waiting for people to come to the counter. I know what patience sounds like. Are you really doing this? He said finally. His voice was raw, but there was heat in it. After everything I just told you, I'm at a hotel. My wife left me by text message. My career is dad. The FBI has my emails. And you're going to throw my words back in my face? I'm not throwing anything, I said. I'm telling you something true, and I need you to hear it. I built a quiet life here, Christopher. It took me 2 years. It cost me more than I can explain. And that life is not a luxury. It's medicine. Multiple myeloma does not go away. My doctor told me early on that stress has a chemical effect on this disease. It feeds it. The peace I have in this house, the routine, the people, the calm, that is what's keeping me alive. I cannot have a crisis in this kitchen. Not yours, not anyone's. That's not cruelty. That's survival. He was quiet again. Different quiet this time. Listening quiet. But I'm not leaving you alone, I said. That's what's different. When you said those 4 words to me, you hung up the phone, and I didn't hear from you for 23 months. I am not doing that. I am on this phone right now. I am going to stay on this phone, and I am going to help you, but it's going to look different from what you asked for. How? There's a woman at my church named Ann Kroger. She has spent 30 years connecting people with the help they actually need. Her son Daniel lives in Falls Church, Virginia, which is about 20 minutes from your hotel. He's a licensed social worker who specializes in crisis stabilization. I'm going to call Ann this morning, and she's going to call Daniel, and he's going to come see you today. He'll help you find a temporary place, a therapist if you don't already have one, and a lawyer for the divorce. I'll cover the first 3 sessions of whatever you need. After that, you pay. Another pause. I could hear the hotel room around him. The hum of a climate control unit. A door closing somewhere down a hallway. You have all that, he said quietly. A whole network. I do. Because people built it for me when I couldn't build it for myself. That was when something shifted. I could hear it happen the way you hear a lock turn. Not dramatic. Just a mechanism doing what it was built to do. Dad, I've been in therapy, he said. For 14 months. I started about 8 months after you called me from Mayo. I knew. I knew I had failed you. I've known it the entire time. I just didn't know how to come back from it. The longer I waited, the bigger it got. And after the wedding, I couldn't figure out how to call you and say I'm sorry for something that was already 2 years old. I sat down at the kitchen table. This was the part that deserved a chair. Whitney's father chose me, Christopher said. I want you to understand that. He picked me out of the firm like a horse at auction. I had the right resume, the right look, the right ambition. Whitney and we weren't. It wasn't what I told myself it was. I think I married her because after Mom died, I just wanted everything to look right. The job, the apartment, the wife, all the boxes checked. Like if I got the outside perfect, the inside would follow. It doesn't work that way, I said. No, he said. It doesn't. A long pause. Then, very quietly, I missed Mom's grave, Dad. I haven't been to Decorah since the funeral. I don't even know if there are flowers. There are flowers, I said. Lena plants them every spring. He made a sound then that I will not describe in detail because it belonged to him and not to this story. I will just say that it was the sound of a man grieving 2 years late for a mother he had not allowed himself to miss because missing her would have meant admitting he'd been absent for everything else too. We talked for another hour after that. I told him about the book. Ruth's book. The Norwegian Women and Their Kitchens. I told him Lena had written an essay about her great-grandmother that made a grown man cry at a bakery counter. I told him about Pete's 2 stories and how they got better every time. I told him about the aquavit and Pastor Thorson's jeans. You built a whole life, he said. Had to, I said. What do I do now, Dad? I looked at the recipe box. Ruth's handwriting on the cards inside. 3 generations of women who believed that the way you take care of someone is by putting something warm in front of them and sitting down. You start sending real letters, I said. To real people, with your handwriting. To me, first. And we'll see. That afternoon, I addressed an envelope to Christopher Vander Sluis, Hampton Inn, Reston, Virginia. Inside, I put a single piece of paper, with 1 line written in pencil. Start with 1 sentence. I'll read it. I mailed it from the blue box on Water Street. Same box, same hand. Different delivery. 4 months later, on the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, I went to the post office on Water Street and picked up 417 cards and letters. They weren't mine to deliver. They were mine to open. The Decorah newspapers had run a second story about the book. Ruth's book. The reporter had mentioned, almost as an aside, that I had been undergoing treatment for multiple myeloma during the 2 years I spent finishing it. The town did what small towns do. They responded. Not with grand gestures. With mail. I sat at the kitchen table and opened them one at a time over the course of 3 evenings. Cards from families I had delivered to for decades. Notes from people whose names I hadn't thought about in years, but who, it turned out, had thought about mine. A woman on Mechanic Street, whose daughter I'd hand-carried a college acceptance letter to in 1998, wrote that she still remembered the way I'd smiled when I handed it over. A 7-year-old girl named Ingrid drew a picture of a mailbox with a heart on it and wrote in green crayon, "Mr. Ed, thank you for our mail." I cried. I want to be honest about that. First time since Ruth's funeral. I sat at the table with 417, opened envelopes around me, and I put my head down, and I wept the way a man weeps when he has been holding something for a very long time, and someone finally says, "You can put that down now." Christopher arrived the day before Thanksgiving on a Greyhound bus from Washington. He had sold the Lexus. He was thinner than I remembered, maybe 15 pounds lighter, wearing a jacket I didn't recognize and carrying a single bag. He stood in the kitchen doorway for a long moment, looking at everything. The recipe box on the counter, the stack of Ruth's printed books on the side table, 200 copies, ready for the Vesterheim Museum gift shop, Lena's Kringle cooling on a rack by the window. The 417 cards still spread across the dining table because I hadn't had the heart to put them away. "You built a whole life, didn't you?" he said. "Had to," I said. He nodded. Then he walked to the table and picked up the card from Ingrid, the one with the mailbox and the heart, and he looked at it for a long time without saying anything. Thanksgiving dinner was 11 people at a table built for 8. Lena brought 2 kinds of kringle and a hot dish that could have fed the Norwegian army. Pete brought a pie he claimed was homemade, which no one believed and everyone ate. Henrik opened the 3rd and final bottle of aquavit and poured small glasses for the table. Marjorie, who had driven down from Cedar Falls, sat next to Christopher and held his hand during the prayer without being asked. Ann Kroger brought lefse so thin you could read a newspaper through it. Pastor Thorson said grace. He kept it short. He thanked God for the hands that had prepared the food, the people who had shown up to eat it, and the kind of love that doesn't require a reason. Christopher asked to speak. He stood up slowly. He took a folded piece of paper from his jacket pocket, handwritten, and read it out loud. He apologized to me. He apologized to his mother, who wasn't there to hear it but whose recipe box was on the counter 3 feet away. He apologized to the people at the table, most of whom he'd never met, for not being the kind of son who showed up when it mattered. His hands shook the entire time. When he finished, Lena Halverson, 5'3" and covered in flour, stood up and said, "Sit down, Christopher. Eat your kringle. Don't make a fuss." The table laughed. Christopher laughed. I laughed. And something that had been closed for a very long time opened just a little. After everyone had gone home and we were washing dishes side by side, Christopher said, "Dad, do you think Mom would have liked tonight?" "She would have," I said. "She would have asked Henrik for a second glass of the aquavit and then pretended she didn't like it." He smiled. It was the first real smile I'd seen from him in years. We are not where we were before Ruth died. I don't think we'll get there. That version of this family existed in a particular window of time, and that window is closed. But we are somewhere true. And true, it turns out, is worth more than perfect. If you're listening to this, and you're in the place I was, if the people who should be standing beside you have decided their comfort matters more than your crisis, I want to say this clearly. Forgiveness is not a forwarding address you hand out to anyone who asks. It is earned. It is built. It arrives when it arrives. On your timeline, not theirs. You are allowed to protect the peace you paid for. The neighbors, the friends, the Lenas and Pites and Henriks of this world. The people who show up, not because they share your name, but because they chose your address. Those are not consolation prizes. Those are the real thing. And if the people who left come back, as they often do, asking for what they refuse to give, you are allowed to pause. You are allowed to breathe. You are allowed to say 4 words, or write them on a piece of paper, and mail them to yourself and keep them in a drawer until the day they're needed. Because sometimes the most powerful thing a man can do is take what was sent to him, hold it with care, and return it to the person who sent it, with a postmark and a steady hand, and not 1 ounce of cruelty. My name is Ed Vandersluis. I am 70 years old. I have cancer I will have for the rest of my life, a town that knows my name, a son who is learning how to write real letters, and a drawer with 1 opened envelope I will never need to mail again. I'm just fine.